Kael Finch forgot to sign out of his shared Netflix account before leaving for his weekend business conference in Portland. When he logged in from his hotel to catch up on shows, the continue watching section showed something that made his blood run cold. A romantic movie he'd never seen, watched at 2 a.m. the night before from his own apartment. But that wasn't the worst part. The account activity showed to users active simultaneously in his living room: his girlfriend, Leila Stone, and his roommate, Miles Taylor, watching intimate couples content together while he was supposedly away. 3 months later, Miles was begging Kael not to raise the rent on the apartment that Kael had secretly purchased. Leila was crying, asking how her supportive boyfriend had become their landlord. But Kael just smiled and reminded them that the lease renewal was coming up soon, and he had some interesting new terms to discuss. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should have known something was wrong when Leila started insisting. I take that weekend conference in Portland. "You work so hard, Kael," she'd said, running her fingers through my hair as I sat at my desk in our Millbrook Heights apartment. "Thornfield Tech Solutions can survive without you for 2 days. Besides, Miles and I will keep each other company." Taylor had been my roommate for 8 months, ever since I'd posted on the Berkmore University housing board looking for someone to split the rent on the spacious 2-bedroom near campus. He was charming, laid back, and had this easy smile that made everyone instantly like him. More importantly, he paid his half of the rent on time and didn't leave dishes in the sink. After a string of nightmare roommates during my graduate program, Miles seemed like a godsend. Leila had moved in with us unofficially about 4 months ago. She kept most of her stuff at her own place across town near Willowbrook Shopping Center, but she spent nearly every night at our apartment. Miles never complained, even when her morning routine tied up the bathroom, or when she'd cook elaborate dinners that filled the kitchen with dirty pans. If anything, he seemed to enjoy having her around. "You two get along so well," I'd mentioned to Leila once, and she'd laughed it off. "Miles is like the brother I never had. Don't be silly." That Friday evening, as I packed for the Portland conference, I felt genuinely good about leaving them together. Miles was planning to study for his medical board exams, and Leila had mentioned wanting to catch up on some shows. They'd probably order pizza, binge-watch something mindless, and I'd come home Sunday to find them both passed out on the couch with empty takeout containers scattered around. The conference itself was standard, corporate fare. Networking sessions, presentations about emerging software trends, and hotel coffee that tasted like burnt water. Saturday evening, after a particularly boring panel on data security, I retreated to my hotel room and opened my laptop. The Portland Marriott's Wi-Fi was surprisingly decent, so I figured I'd decompress with some Netflix before calling it a night. That's when I saw it. Our shared account showed recent activity that made no sense. The Notebook had been watched at 2:17 a.m. the previous night. Leila knew I hated romantic movies, and she usually watched them on her own account when I wasn't around. But more confusing was the timestamp I'd left for Portland at 6 p.m. Friday. And Leila had texted me at midnight saying she was already asleep, missing you. I clicked on the account activity section, something I'd never bothered to check before. The detailed log showed 2 simultaneous users in my apartment from 11 p.m. Friday until 3 a.m. Saturday. 2 separate viewing profiles, both active in the same location. Watching the same content at the same time, my stomach dropped. I scrolled through the viewing history. After The Notebook, they'd watched Dirty Dancing, then something called 365 Days, a movie I'd never heard of but whose thumbnail suggested it wasn't exactly family-friendly content. The activity log showed them pausing, rewinding certain scenes, and even switching to something called Adult Couples, Intimacy Guides. I stared at the screen for a full 5 minutes, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe Leila had invited a friend over, but she would have mentioned that. Maybe Miles had brought someone home, but his dating life had been non-existent lately, and he would have given me a heads up about having company in our shared space. The truth was staring me in the face, but my brain kept rejecting it. I pulled up my phone and checked our text conversation from the night before. "Leila, 11:43 p.m. Missing you already. Miles is already crashed on the couch with his textbooks. It's going to bed now. Love you, me. 11:45 p.m. Love you too. Sleep well. See you Sunday night. Leila, 11:47 p.m. Can't wait. Have sweet dreams about me according to Netflix. At 11:47 p.m., the exact moment she was texting me about going to bed, she and Miles were starting their romantic movie marathon. I felt physically sick. My hands shook as I navigated to our home security app. I'd installed cameras in the common areas months ago after a break-in scare in our neighborhood. The living room camera faced the couch and TV area. I'd never used it to spy on anyone. It was purely for security when we were all out of the apartment. The footage from Friday night loaded slowly on the hotel Wi-Fi. At first, everything looked normal. Miles was indeed on the couch with textbooks spread around him. Leila emerged from our bedroom around 10 p.m. in pajamas, said something to Miles that made him laugh, then disappeared into the kitchen. I fast-forwarded to 11 p.m. That's when I saw Leila return to the living room carrying 2 glasses of wine. She'd changed out of her conservative pajamas into something I'd never seen before, a silk nightgown that barely covered her thighs. Miles had cleared his textbooks away and was patting the couch cushion next to him. I watched in horror as my girlfriend of 2 years settled onto the couch next to my roommate, curling her legs underneath her and leaning against his shoulder. As he navigated to Netflix, the timestamp on the security footage matched perfectly with her text about going to bed. I couldn't watch anymore. I slammed the laptop shut and paced around the hotel room, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? Was this their first time? Or had I been oblivious to something happening right under my nose for weeks, months? Every interaction between them over the past few months suddenly took on new meaning. The way Miles always offered to help Leila with her grocery bags. How she'd started doing his laundry along with ours to be efficient. The inside jokes they'd developed that I never quite understood. The way they'd both encouraged me to take this Portland trip. I felt like an idiot. But strangely, I didn't feel the explosive anger I would have expected. Instead, I felt cold, calculating, like a switch had flipped in my brain. Transforming hurt into something sharper and more focused, I reopened the laptop and methodically screenshotted the Netflix activity. The security camera timestamps and our text conversation. Evidence. I'd need evidence for what came next. Because if Leila and Miles thought they could play me for a fool, they were about to learn that I was much smarter than they realized. And I was definitely not the same trusting, naive guy who'd walked out of that apartment on Friday evening. The old Kael would have driven straight home from Portland, bursting through the apartment door at 2 a.m. to confront them both. The old Kael would have screamed, thrown things, and demanded explanations while tears streamed down his face. The old Kael had done exactly that 2 years ago when he'd caught his ex-girlfriend, Emma, kissing some guy at a Berkmore University party, making a complete fool of himself in front of half the engineering department. But this wasn't 2 years ago, and I wasn't that same desperate emotional wreck anymore. Instead, I spent the remainder of my Portland weekend researching. Not about Leila and Miles. I'd seen enough evidence to know what was happening. No, I researched something much more interesting, the apartment complex where we live. Millbrook. Heights had been built in 2019 by Evergreen Development Corporation. The complex consisted of 48 units across 6 buildings, and according to public records, individual units occasionally went up for sale as condominiums. More importantly, I discovered that 3 units were currently listed with Pinnacle Realty Group, including one identical to ours in the same building. I called the listing agent, Sylvan Beckett, from my hotel room Sunday morning. I'm interested in investing in rental property, I told him, keeping my voice casual, preferably something that already has reliable tenants in place. Sylvan's excitement was audible through the phone. You're in luck. We have several investor-friendly properties. There's actually a unit in Millbrook Heights that might be perfect. Great location near the university. The current owner is motivated to sell quickly due to a job relocation. We scheduled a viewing for the following Wednesday, Sunday evening. I returned home with the best performance of my life planned out. I walked through the door with my usual conference exhaustion, dragging my suitcase and complaining about airline delays. Kael. Leila bounced up from the couch where she'd been sitting, notably on the opposite end from Miles, who was back to his textbooks and coffee. How was Portland? I missed you so much. Missed you so much. She wrapped her arms around me, and I forced myself to hug her back. Her hair smelled like Miles's expensive shampoo, the kind he ordered online because regular drugstore brands weren't good enough for his medical professional image. A detail I filed away with everything else. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Boring as expected, I said, mustering a tired smile. Bunch of tech brothers talking about blockchain applications I'll never use. How was your weekend? Quiet, she said quickly. Miles and I just ordered pizza Friday and watched some movies. I went to bed early. Miles looked up from his textbook, and I caught the briefest flicker of something guilt, fear across his face before he smiled. Yeah, pretty low-key. Leila keeps much better hours than you do. I think she was asleep by midnight both nights. Sounds perfect, I said, meaning it in a way they couldn't possibly understand. Over the next few days, I began what I privately called the documentation project. I started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored, and the patterns were so obvious I wondered how I'd missed them for months. Leila's phone, which used to be casually left around the apartment, now never left her side. She developed a habit of stepping into the bedroom or bathroom to take calls, even from her sister or her boss at Willowbrook Marketing Agency. When I asked about it, she claimed the apartment had bad reception in the living room, a lie since our Wi-Fi signal was excellent throughout. Miles had started doing his own laundry again. After months of Leila handling it to be helpful, more telling, he'd started buying different groceries. Instead of his usual practical choices, the fridge was now stocked with organic berries, expensive yogurt, and the specific brand of oat milk that Leila preferred but that cost 3 times more than regular milk. They'd also developed an elaborate system of innocent touches and shared glances that they thought were subtle. Miles would brush past Leila in the kitchen, their hands touching briefly as they reached for the same cabinet. Leila would laugh at Miles's medical school stories with an enthusiasm she'd never shown for my work in software development. Most damning was their behavior. When I announced I'd be working late or traveling for other conferences, both of them would practically light up, trying to hide their excitement behind concerned expressions. Another late night at Thornfield Tech? Leila would ask with fake sympathy. You're working too hard? I could keep Leila company, Miles would offer generously. Make sure she's not lonely. The audacity was almost impressive, but instead of confronting them, I used their deception to my advantage. Every late night at the office became an opportunity for reconnaissance. I'd park down the street and watch our apartment windows, timing when lights went out and came back on. I tracked their movements through the security system I'd installed, and which they'd both forgotten about. Most importantly, I met with Sylvan Beckett. The unit he showed me was identical to ours, just 2 floors up. Same layout, same square footage, same view of the university campus. The current owner, a professor who'd taken a position at Stanford, was asking $340,000, a fair price for the area. The beauty of these units, Sylvan explained as we toured the empty apartment, is that they're zoned for rental income. Many owners live here during grad school, then keep them as investment properties after graduation. The rental market near Berkmore is incredibly stable. What kind of rental income could I expect? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Units like this typically rent for $2,800 to $3,200 per month, depending on the specific layout and condition, split between 2 tenants. That's very affordable for the area. I nodded thoughtfully. And if I needed to, adjust rents for existing tenants? How would that process work? Sylvan's smile became knowing. Well, if you purchased a unit with existing tenants, you'd honor their current lease terms until renewal. But when it comes time to sign a new lease, double, quotes he shrugged. Market rates are market rates. Tenants can accept the new terms or find housing elsewhere. That evening, I sat in my home office while Leila and Miles watched a movie in the living room, keeping a careful, innocent distance between them on the couch. I pulled up my investment portfolio on my laptop. Between my savings, my Thornfield Tech Solutions, stock options, and a small inheritance from my grandfather, I had enough liquid assets to make a cash offer on the apartment. But more importantly, I had something else. Leverage C. What Leila and Miles didn't know was that I'd been the one covering Miles's portion of the utilities for the past 3 months. His medical school expenses had gotten tight, and rather than lose a good roommate, I'd quietly taken over his electric and internet bills. He thought Leila had negotiated a better rate with the utility companies. They also didn't know that our current lease was in my name only. When Miles had moved in, our landlord had simply added him as an additional occupant, rather than requiring him to undergo a full credit check and background verification. Leila wasn't on the lease at all, technically. She was just a long-term guest. As I listened to them laugh together at whatever romantic comedy they'd chosen, I opened a new browser tab and began drafting an offer letter for the apartment upstairs. If they wanted to play house together, I'd be happy to accommodate them. As their landlord, the transformation wasn't just strategic, it was liberating. For months, I'd been the fool who worked long hours to support our comfortable lifestyle, while they built their secret relationship behind my back. But now I was the one with the power, the resources, and most importantly, the plan. Let them have their romantic movie nights and their stolen moments. Soon enough, they'd be paying me for the privilege. The apartment purchase moved faster than I'd expected, Sylvan Beckett called Tuesday morning with news that the seller had accepted my cash offer of $335,000, $5,000 under asking price. Congratulations, Kael, Sylvan said, his enthusiasm evident even through the phone. Professor Martinez is thrilled to have a quick, clean sale. We can close in 2 weeks if the inspection goes smoothly. 2 weeks. Perfect timing. While the legal paperwork moved through channels, I focused on understanding exactly what I was dealing with. The Netflix evidence had shown me the what, but I needed to know the when. How long, and most importantly, who else might be aware of what was happening under my own roof? My first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Leila's best friend, Aubriana Hayes. Aubriana worked as a nurse at Berkmore General Hospital, where Miles was doing his clinical rotations. I'd met her dozens of times over the past 2 years, usually at group dinners or parties where she'd spend the evening making pointed comments about men who don't appreciate what they have. I'd always assumed she was referring to her own dating disasters. Now I wondered if her commentary had been more specific. I orchestrated running into her at Greystone Coffee House, the place near the hospital where medical students and nurses grabbed caffeine between shifts. It wasn't hard. Aubriana was notorious for her 3 p.m. espresso runs, and I'd simply started working from the coffee shop instead of my office. "Kael," she said, looking genuinely surprised when she spotted me at a corner table with my laptop. "What brings you to our little medical district hangout? Client meeting nearby?" I lied easily. "Mind if you join me? Could use a break from debugging code." She slid into the chair across from me, studying my face with the intensity that made her good at her job. "You look tired. Everything okay?" "Just work stress," I said, then took a calculated risk. "Plus, you know how it is living with roommates. Sometimes you feel like you're intruding on other people's space." Aubriana's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Roommates can be ... complicated. Miles is great," I continued carefully. "Really helpful, especially when I'm traveling for work. He and Leila get along well, hem." Aubriana stirred her latte with more focus than necessary. "How often are you traveling these days?" "More than I'd like. Portland last weekend, and I've got another conference next month in Denver." She was quiet for a long moment, then looked up at me with something that might have been pity. "Kael, can I ask you something? Do you trust Leila?" The question hung in the air between us. Could have deflected, changed the subject, or given the expected answer about loving and trusting my girlfriend completely. Instead, I leaned forward slightly. "Why do you ask?" Aubriana glanced around the coffee shop, then lowered her voice. "'Cause I've seen her at the hospital multiple times. Having lunch with Miles in the cafeteria, and they don't look like two people who are just friends." My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. When was this? The first time was maybe 6 weeks ago. I almost went over to say hi, but something about their body language stopped me. They were sitting close, holding hands across the table. When I mentioned it to Leila later, she said she'd never been to the hospital. 6 weeks. The affair had been going on for at least 6 weeks. The most recent time was last Thursday, Aubriana continued. During your Portland trip, they were in the parking garage by Miles's car and Kael. I'm sorry, but they were kissing. Not like friends. Like they were together. I felt the familiar cold calculation settle over me. Did anyone else see them? Anyone else see them? I don't think so. It was late after visiting ours. But Kael, I've been wondering if I should say something. You deserve to know. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. Can I ask you not to mention this conversation to Leila? I need to process this. Aubriana nodded, relief visible on her face. Of course. But Kael, don't let them make a fool of you. You're worth more than that. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, processing what I'd learned. 6 weeks minimum, possibly longer. Public displays at Miles's workplace, which meant they'd gotten comfortable enough to take risks. And Leila had lied directly to her best friend about it. This wasn't a recent mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a sustained, deliberate deception. That evening, I decided to test the boundaries of their boldness. I got invited to present at a Denver conference next month, I announced over dinner. 3 days, 2 nights, pretty good career opportunity. Watched their faces carefully. Leila's eyes lit up before she caught herself and rearranged her expression into supportive concern. That's amazing, honey, she said. When is it? The 15th through 17th. I know it's short notice. Don't worry about me, Leila said quickly. I'll be fine here. Miles nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, man, take the opportunity. I'll make sure Leila doesn't get lonely. The casual way he said it, the assumption that he'd be the one taking care of my girlfriend in my absence, was staggering. You're both so supportive, I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Later that night, Leila was in the shower. I made another discovery that filled in more pieces of the puzzle. Her phone had been charging on the nightstand, and when a text notification lit up the screen, I glimpsed enough to make my blood boil. The message was from Miles. Can't wait for Denver trip. I have something special planned for our first night truly alone. I quietly picked up the phone and scrolled. Through their recent messages, what I found was worse than I'd imagined. They'd been texting constantly, dozens of messages every day, even when they were both in the same apartment. The content ranged from mundane, "Don't forget we need milk," to intimate. "Can't stop thinking about last night," to logistical Kael's working late again. "Come to the bedroom at 10. But the most damning messages were the ones where they discussed me. Miles, do you think he suspects anything? Leila, no way. He's too focused on work to notice what's happening right in front of him. Miles, sometimes I feel bad. He's a good guy. Leila, he is, but he's not you. I can't help how I feel. Miles, after Denver, maybe we should figure out how to tell him. This sneaking around is getting exhausting. Leila, let's see how the trip goes. Maybe he'll be ready to hear that we want to be together. I took screenshots of everything, adding them to my growing evidence file by the time the apartment inspection was completed the following week. I had a comprehensive understanding of what I was dealing with. The affair had been going on for at least 2 months, possibly longer. They were planning to make it official after my Denver trip, viewed me as oblivious and work-obsessed, too naive to notice their obvious connection. Most importantly, they were comfortable. They'd gotten away with it for so long that they'd stopped being careful. They thought they held all the cards. Inspection came back clean, Sylvan informed me over the phone. No issues at all. We're on track to close next Friday. Perfect, I said, looking up at the ceiling of my current apartment. In exactly 10 days, I'd own the unit directly above us. That evening, I watched Leila and Miles perform their careful dance of stolen glances and innocent interactions, and I smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. They had no idea that their landlord to-be was sitting right across from them, methodically planning their future. The apartment closing went smoothly. Friday afternoon, I sat in Sylvan Beckett's office at Pinnacle Realty Group, signing the final documents that made me the official owner of Unit 4B at Millbrook Heights, 2 floors directly above the apartment where my girlfriend and roommate were continuing their elaborate charade. "Congratulations," Sylvan said, handing me the keys. "You're now a property owner in one of Birchmore's most desirable rental markets." "Thank you," I replied, pocketing the keys. "When can I start making changes to the unit?" "Immediately. It's yours now. Planning to renovate before finding tenants?" "Something like that," I said with a smile that made Sylvan look slightly puzzled. That evening, I announced my Denver conference trip was confirmed for the following weekend. The presentation went well. I told Leila and Miles over dinner at our small kitchen table. They want me to keynote their software innovation panel. Leila's excitement was barely contained. "It's incredible, honey. How long will you be gone?" "I fly out Thursday evening, present Friday and Saturday, then catch a Sunday afternoon flight back. So 3 full days. Miles nodded approvingly. "That's a big career opportunity, man. You should be proud." "I am," I said, meeting his eyes directly. "It's funny how things work out. Sometimes you put in all this effort, and eventually people notice what you're really capable of." Something in my tone made Miles shift uncomfortably. But Leila was too focused on her internal celebration to notice the undercurrent. Over the next few days, I began what I privately called Operation Comfort Zone Disruption. First, I started coming home at unexpected times. Instead of my predictable late nights at Thornfield Tech, I'd return randomly at 6 p.m. or take long lunch breaks to grab something from the apartment. Each time, I'd find Leila and Miles in compromising proximity, sitting closer than necessary, on the couch, lingering in the kitchen together, or hastily moving apart when they heard my key in the door. "You're home early?" became Leila's standard greeting, always delivered with a slightly strained smile. "Slow day at the office?" I'd reply cheerfully. "Thought I'd spend more time with my favorite people." The tension in the apartment became palpable. They couldn't continue their usual routine of intimate moments and stolen touches with me around unpredictably. I watched them grow increasingly frustrated with their inability to connect while maintaining their facade. Second, I started paying closer attention to details they'd previously taken for granted. "Miles, I noticed you've been buying organic groceries lately," I mentioned one evening while making dinner. "That's expensive on a med school budget." Miles froze, a container of the premium blueberries Leila loved in his hand. I figured I should eat healthier. "All those late-night study sessions?" "Make sense," I said casually. "Though I'm curious, since when do you eat Greek yogurt and oat milk?" "Last month, you were strictly a cereal Land Wriggler milk guy." Leila jumped in quickly. "I've been talking to him about nutrition. Better eating habits, you know?" "That's sweet of you," I said, looking directly at her. "You two seem to discuss a lot of things when I'm not around." The silence that followed was deafening. Third, I began asking questions that made them scramble to keep their stories straight. "Leila, what time did you get home from work Tuesday?" I asked one evening, already knowing she'd actually left her. "Job at Willowbrook Marketing Agency early to meet Miles at the hospital." "The usual time," she said automatically. "Around 6. "That's weird. I called your office around 5:30 to see if you wanted me to pick up dinner. And they said you'd left at 3. I watched her face cycle through panic, calculation, and forced casualness. "Oh, right. I had to run errands. Lost track of time at Greystone. Shopping center. Greystone's clear across town from here." "That's a long trip for errands." Miles cleared his throat loudly. "Shh. Hey, did you guys catch that documentary about medical innovations last night? Really fascinating stuff." The desperation in his attempt to change the subject was almost amusing. But my most effective strategy was something they never saw coming. Started treating them exactly like what they were, roommates, and nothing more. For 2 years I'd been the attentive boyfriend who remembered Leila's favorite coffee order, who picked up her prescriptions, who automatically included her in every plan and decision. I'd been the considerate roommate who covered Miles's utility bills, who kept his favorite beer stocked, who gave him space and privacy. Now I stopped. When Leila mentioned she was out of her prescription allergy medication, I shrugged and said, "You should probably call the pharmacy." When she hinted about wanting to try the new Italian restaurant downtown, I replied, "Sounds fun. Let me know how it is." When Miles ran out of his expensive coffee pods, I bought my usual generic brand and left his empty container on the counter. The shift was subtle but devastating. Leila began looking confused and hurt when I failed to anticipate her needs. Miles started offering to pay for utilities he thought I'd forgotten to split. "Is everything okay?" Leila asked one evening after I'd come home, eaten dinner alone, and gone straight to my office without our usual check-in conversation. "Everything's fine," I said. "Why? You seem distant lately. Just focused on work. This Denver presentation is important." She studied my face, clearly sensing something was wrong, but unable to identify what had changed. From her perspective, I was the same attentive Kael. I wasn't angry, wasn't making accusations, wasn't causing scenes. I was just less available, less invested, less present. It was driving her crazy. Miles was struggling too. He'd grown comfortable with our friendship, with the casual way I'd covered his expenses and included him in plans. Now he found himself paying his full share of utilities for the first time in months, buying his own groceries, and experiencing the apartment as what it actually was. A rental arrangement between acquaintances rather than a home shared by friends. The real breakthrough came when I started mentioning Ragnar Reed. Ragnar was a legitimate coworker at Thornfield Tech, a brilliant systems analyst who'd recently moved to Berkmore from Seattle. He was also single, good-looking, and had mentioned wanting to explore the local social scene. Ragnar's looking for people to hang out with. I mentioned to Leila one evening. I told him he should meet you. You two would get along well. Leila's expression shifted through confusion, hurt, and something approaching panic. "Why would you? I mean, I have friends." "Sure, but it's always good to meet new people. Ragnar's really interesting. He's into art and hiking, all that stuff you like." "Kael, that's weird. Why are you trying to set me up with other people?" "Set you up?" I looked genuinely puzzled. "I'm just talking about friendship. Unless, did you think I meant something else?" The conversation left her visibly shaken, and I caught her and Miles having an intense whispered discussion in the kitchen afterward. By Thursday morning, the day of my supposed departure for Denver, both of them were walking on eggshells around me. They'd clearly spent the week trying to figure out if I suspected something, but my behavior had been just normal enough to make them question their own paranoia. "Have a great trip," Leila said as I loaded my suitcase into my car. "I'll miss you." "Thanks," I replied, giving her a quick kiss that felt like kissing a stranger. "You and Miles have fun. Try not to burn the place down." Miles laughed uncomfortably. "We'll try to keep the excitement to a minimum." "I'm sure you will," I said, meeting his eyes with a smile that made him take a step back. As I drove away from Millbrook Heights, I could see them in the rearview mirror, standing together on the sidewalk, watching my car disappear around the corner. What they didn't know was that I wasn't going to Denver. I was going to spend the weekend in my new apartment. It's 2 floors above them, a clear view of our building's entrance and parking area. It was time to see exactly what they did when they thought they were finally free. From the window of my new apartment in Unit 4B, I had a perfect view of the Millbrook Heights parking lot and the entrance to our building. I'd spent Friday setting up a comfortable observation post with my laptop, coffee, and the high-powered binoculars I'd purchased for the occasion. The show began. Friday evening at exactly 6:47 p.m., Miles's car pulled into his usual parking spot. But instead of heading straight inside like he normally did after his hospital shift, he popped the trunk and began unloading what looked like enough groceries for a romantic dinner. Expensive wine, fresh flowers, and several bags from Greystone Gourmet market, the upscale grocery store that costs 3 times more than our usual shopping spot. 20 minutes later, Leila arrived home from Willowbrook Marketing Agency, even from 2 floors up. I could see her excitement as she practically skipped to the building entrance. Through the security camera system I still had access to, I watched them embrace in our apartment's living room, like reunited lovers who'd been apart for months instead of people who saw each other every single day. But Saturday morning is when things got truly interesting. At 10:23 a.m., an unfamiliar car pulled into the visitor parking area. A woman I didn't recognize got out, tall, blonde, probably in her 30s, and walked confidently toward our building. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Leila calling from our apartment. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice artificially bright. "How's Denver?" "Great. I replied, watching the blonde woman exit our building and get back in her car. Just finished my presentation. How are things there? Quiet. Miles is studying. I'm just reading. Missing you? Through the security camera, I could see her pacing nervously in our kitchen, while Miles gestured frantically in the background, clearly stressed about something. That's nice, I said. Who was your visitor this morning? The silence that followed was deafening. Visitor? Leila's voice climbed an octave. What visitor? I have the security app on my phone, remember? Someone came by around 10:30, more frantic gesturing from Miles in the background. Oh, that was... someone looking for apartment to see. Wrong unit. Interesting. They seemed to know exactly where they were going. Kael, why are you watching the security cameras from Denver? That's kind of weird, just checking on things. You can never be too careful. After I hung up, I spent the next hour researching the license plate of the mysterious visitor. A quick search through social media revealed her identity, Dr. Linda Croft, supervisor from Miles's medical program at Berkmore General Hospital. But why would Miles's supervisor visit on a Saturday morning? And why would they lie about it? The answer came at 2:15 p.m. when my phone exploded with notifications. The first was a text from Miles. We need to talk when you get back. Something important. The second was from Leila. Call me when you can. We have news. The third was an email. From our current landlord, Henderson Property Management, notice of lease violation and mandatory inspections scheduled for Monday. Warning due to unauthorized occupant reports. My blood ran cold. Someone had reported Leila as an unauthorized long-term occupant, which could result in eviction proceedings for both Miles and me. But who would? ... Then it hit me. Dr. Linda Croft hadn't come to visit socially. She'd come to confront Miles about his relationship with Leila, probably based on reports from hospital staff who'd witnessed their public displays of affection. Medical programs took professional conduct seriously, and students dating while on clinical rotations could face disciplinary action. The dominoes were falling faster than I'd anticipated. Sunday morning brought the crisis to its peak. I was preparing to return home and confront them when I heard shouting from the apartment below. Through the thin floors of the older building, I could make out raised voices, an argument that was escalating rapidly. I grabbed my keys and headed downstairs. The shouting was coming from inside our apartment, but I could hear it clearly in the hallway. Leila's voice high and panicked. You said your supervisor wouldn't find out. Miles defensive and angry. I didn't know someone would report us to the medical board. What do you mean, medical board? Linda said. There's going to be an investigation. If they determine I violated professional conduct standards, I could be expelled from the program. But what about us? What about our plans? I don't know, Leila. Maybe we moved too fast. Maybe we should have waited until Kael. That's when I used my key and walked through the front door. The scene that greeted me was perfect in its chaos. Leila was sitting on our couch in tears, still wearing Miles's medical school sweatshirt. Miles was pacing frantically, his hair disheveled, papers scattered across the coffee table that clearly related to some kind of disciplinary proceeding. They both froze when they saw me standing in the doorway with my suitcase. Kael, Leila whispered. You're back early. The light got moved up, I said calmly, taking in the scene. Looks like I missed quite a weekend. Miles stepped protectively in front of Leila, and something inside me snapped into crystalline focus. Actually, I said, setting down my suitcase and pulling out my phone, I didn't miss anything at all. I showed them the screen, which displayed the security camera footage from the past 3 days. I've been watching the whole time. The color drained from both their faces. From where? Leila asked weakly. I smiled and pulled out my second set of keys, the ones to unit for B. From upstairs, from my new apartment, the one I bought last week, Miles's. Legs gave out and he collapsed onto the couch next to Leila. Which means, I continued, my voice steady and calm, that as of Monday morning, when Henderson Property Management evicts you both for lease violations, you're going to need a new place to live. I dangled the keys to 4B in front of them. Lucky. For you, I happen to be your new landlord. Asterisk, the silence in our apartment stretched for what felt like hours. Leila stared at the keys in my hand as if they were a snake about to strike. Miles had gone completely pale, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. You bought an apartment? Leila finally whispered. Last week, I confirmed cheerfully. Cash offer. Quite the investment opportunity, actually. Prime location near the university, stable rental market, and I already knew the tenants would be motivated to pay market rates. Miles found his voice. Kael, man, I know this looks bad, does it? I interrupted. 'Cause from where I'm standing, it looks like exactly what it is. My girlfriend and my roommate having an affair while I paid the bills and played the fool. We didn't mean for it to happen, Leila said, tears streaming down her face. It just ... we fell in love. How romantic, I said dryly. Nothing says true love like sneaking around behind your boyfriend's back for months. I walked to the kitchen counter and pulled out a folder I'd prepared. Here's how this works, I said, spreading out papers between us. Henderson Property Management will formally evict you by Wednesday, but I'm prepared to offer you a lease on unit for B. Miles grabbed the papers. What are the terms? What are the terms? Market rate. $3,200 per month. First and last month's rent due immediately. 6-month lease, non-negotiable. Leila's eyes widened. That's nearly double what we pay here. That's what market rate means, Leila. Supply and demand. Miles was doing the math, panic growing in his eyes. Kael, you know I can't afford that with medical school expenses. Out. And with the board investigation. That sounds like a personal problem, I said with a smile. But don't worry. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Love conquers all, right? The beauty of it was perfect. They could either pay my premium rates and struggle financially while living under my control, or they could find somewhere else to live together and face the reality that their affair had destroyed all their comfortable arrangements. Kael, wait. Please, Leila begged. Can't we work something out? We just did, I replied, heading toward the bedroom to pack my things. You have 48 hours to decide? I'll be staying in a hotel until Wednesday, then moving into 4B permanently. Yes. As I packed, I could hear them arguing in hushed, desperate whispers. The medical board investigation would likely result in Miles being suspended, making it nearly impossible for him to afford the rent. Meanwhile, Leila's marketing job barely covered her own expenses, let alone premium housing costs. They'd gotten exactly what they wanted each other. They just hadn't considered what it would cost them. 6 months later, I received notice that they were breaking their lease early. Miles had transferred to a medical program in another state, and Leila had moved back in with her parents. From my apartment balcony, I watched them load their belongings into a moving truck, struggling with furniture and boxes without my help. For the first time, as their truck pulled away from Millbrook Heights, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Sylvan Beckett had called earlier about another investment property that had just come on the market after all. Being a landlord was turning out to be quite profitable. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. Right. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.